The champagne was still fizzing in my glass when my husband took the microphone at his promotion party and said the words that would change my life forever. "I want to thank the woman who truly made all of this possible," he announced to the 300 guests at the Riverside Grand Hotel. "The woman who believed in me when no one else did. The woman I should have been brave enough to love openly from the very beginning." He walked right past me, past the table where I sat in my new emerald dress, and took my best friend Harper's hand. "I'm leaving my wife. Harper and I are getting married next month." The room erupted in confused murmurs. I sat frozen, watching my husband of 12 years kiss my best friend of 20 on the lips while camera flashes exploded around them. Someone started clapping. Then more people joined in, probably thinking this was some kind of planned announcement, some modern declaration of love they should celebrate. But before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the question I asked that sent Harper to the hospital and put my husband in handcuffs, let me take you back to that moment. Hello everyone, I'm Martha. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, enjoy the story. My name is Clara Bennett. I was 38 years old, a former interior designer who had given up her career to support my husband Richard's rise through the pharmaceutical industry. We lived in a beautiful colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut, the kind of house I had inherited from my mother after she died 3 years ago. I thought I had the perfect life. Richard was the golden boy of Meridian Pharmaceuticals, handsome, charming, with a smile that could convince anyone of anything. That night, he was being promoted to executive vice president, the youngest in company history. I had spent weeks planning this celebration. I had chosen the venue, approved the menu, selected the flowers. I had even helped Harper pick out her dress, never suspecting that she would wear it to steal my husband. When Richard made his announcement, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. I looked at Harper, my best friend since college, the maid of honor at my wedding, the godmother of the child I had lost to miscarriage 5 years ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just smiled at Richard like he was the sun and she had been cold her entire life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to run away. But something inside me, something cold and sharp, clicked into place. I remembered a conversation from 2 months ago, when Richard had pressured me to sign papers transferring my mother's house into a joint trust. "For tax purposes," he had said. "Our accountant recommends it." I had trusted him. I had signed everything. I stood up slowly. The room quieted. Everyone was watching me, waiting to see how the discarded wife would react. Would she cry? Would she make a scene? I walked toward Richard and Harper, my heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. "Congratulations," I said, my voice steady. Then I turned to face the crowd. "I just have one question for my husband." I looked directly at Richard. "Since you're leaving me for Harper, I assume you'll be returning the $3 million from my mother's estate that you transferred to your offshore account in the Caymans last month?" The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face went pale. Harper's smile froze. Someone dropped a champagne glass, and the shatter echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "What are you talking about?" Richard laughed nervously, but his eyes were wild. "Clara, you're confused. You're upset. Let's not do this here. Account number 7,734 to 2,891, I continued. First Caribbean International Bank. I found the statements in your desk drawer last week when I was looking for our tax documents. I hadn't actually seen any statements. I was bluffing, throwing out the name of a bank I had seen on a piece of mail he had quickly hidden. But the way his face crumpled told me I had hit something true. Harper suddenly gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. She stumbled backward, hyperventilating. I can't breathe." She collapsed to the floor, her carefully applied makeup streaking with tears and sweat. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouted. The room dissolved into chaos. Richard dropped to Harper's side, but not before shooting me a look of pure hatred that I would never forget. Paramedics arrived within minutes. As they loaded Harper onto a stretcher, Richard grabbed my arm and pulled me into a corner. His fingers dug into my skin hard enough to leave bruises. "You stupid woman," he hissed. "You have no idea what you've done, no idea what's at stake. Keep your mouth shut, or I swear to God, Clara, I will destroy you." He released me and followed Harper out of the ballroom. I stood there, surrounded by guests who were now looking at me with a mixture of pity, judgment, and morbid curiosity. The party was over. My marriage was over. My life, as I knew it, was over. I went home that night to find the locks changed. My keycard to our joint bank accounts had been deactivated. When I called Richard's phone, it went straight to voicemail. When I tried to access our savings online, I discovered that every account had been emptied. I sat in my car in the driveway of the house my mother had left me, the house that was now apparently in Richard's name too, and I tried not to fall apart. I had nowhere to go. I had no money. I had no friends left because Richard had systematically isolated me over the years, convincing me that we didn't need anyone but each other. I tried calling people from my old life. My former business partner hung up when she heard my voice. My cousin said she was too busy to talk and never called back. My neighbor, who I had brought soup to when she was sick last winter, pretended not to be home when I knocked on her door. Word had spread fast. Whatever Richard had told people, whatever story he was spinning, it had turned me into a pariah overnight. At 2 a.m, I remembered someone, Eleanor Walsh, my mother's attorney. She had handled my mother's estate and had seemed troubled by something in the final months before my mother's death. She had tried to meet with me privately several times, but Richard had always found a reason to cancel or to insist on being present. Eventually, she had stopped trying. I found her number in an old address book. She answered on the third ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. "Clara, I've been waiting for your call." She gave me an address, a small apartment in New Haven that she said my mother had rented years ago. "Your mother was a smart woman, Clara. She saw things that you weren't ready to see. She left you tools. Everything you need is there." An hour later, I stood in a tiny studio apartment that smelled of dust and old books. A calendar on the wall was frozen on the date my mother died, 3 years and 2 months ago. I searched the apartment for hours before I found it. A locked, fireproof box hidden behind a false panel in the closet. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Bank statements showing that Richard had been siphoning money from my mother's accounts for years before she died. Emails between Richard and Harper, dating back almost a decade, discussing their plan to handle the situation once they had secured the old woman's assets. And a letter from my mother, written in her shaking hand just days before her death. "My dearest Clara," she wrote, "if you're reading this, then I am gone and my worst fears have come true. I know you love Richard. I know you won't want to believe what I'm about to tell you, but he is not the man you think he is. He has been stealing from me for years, and I believe Harper has been helping him." When I confronted them, Richard looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. He said I was confused, that my memory was failing. He said no one would believe a woman with dementia over him, but my mind is clear, Clara. Clearer than it has ever been. I have documented everything. I have hidden the evidence where only you can find it. I fear they will try to silence me before I can tell you the truth. If something happens to me, promise me you will not let them win. Promise me you will find justice. I love you, my darling girl. Trust Eleanor. She knows what to do. My mother didn't have dementia. Her doctor had confirmed that just weeks before she died. But Richard had convinced everyone otherwise, had planted seeds of doubt at every family gathering, had sighed sympathetically when my mother forgot a name or repeated a story. "It's so sad," he would say. "She's declining so fast." She had died of a heart attack, alone in this very apartment. The official story was that she had wandered here in a state of confusion and collapsed. But now I understood. She hadn't wandered. She had been hiding. I called Eleanor at dawn. She came to the apartment immediately, bringing coffee and a folder of her own documents. "I tried to warn you," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "After your mother died, I noticed irregularities in the estate. Money that should have gone to you was being redirected. But every time I tried to raise concerns, Richard was there, smoothing things over, explaining it away. He threatened to report me to the Bar Association, said I was taking advantage of a grieving widow to pad my billable hours. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We need more than documents," Eleanor said. "Your husband is too well connected. The police chief in Greenwich plays golf with him every Sunday. Half the judges in the county have received campaign donations from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. We need a confession, Clara. We need them to admit what they've done in front of witnesses." The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Meridian Pharmaceuticals was hosting its annual charity gala, a black tie event that raised millions for children's hospitals. Richard was scheduled to receive the company's Humanitarian of the Year award, an irony so bitter I could taste it. And Harper, now publicly his fiancée, would be by his side, wearing a diamond necklace that I recognized from the photographs in my mother's box. It was my mother's necklace, a family heirloom that had been passed down for 4 generations. It had gone missing from my mother's jewelry box after her death. Richard had told me it must have been lost or stolen, but there it was, around Harper's neck in the engagement announcement photos that were plastered all over social media. I had a plan. Eleanor had a contact at a news outlet in Boston, far enough from Richard's sphere of influence to be trustworthy. The reporter, a woman named Diane Chen who had won awards for exposing corporate fraud, agreed to attend the gala undercover. Getting into the event wasn't hard. I still had friends in the catering industry from my interior design days. One of them, a woman named Maria, whose daughter's college fund I had contributed to years ago, got me a server's uniform and a backstage pass. The ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across the crowd of politicians, executives, and socialites. Richard stood at the center of it all, resplendent in his tuxedo, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. Harper floated beside him in a red gown, my mother's diamonds glittering at her throat. I watched them from the shadows, carrying trays of champagne, invisible in my server's uniform. I watched Richard laugh with the mayor. I watched Harper charm a group of elderly donors. I watched them both lie with every smile, every gesture, every carefully crafted word. The award ceremony began at 9 o'clock. The company's CEO gave a speech about Richard's tireless dedication to improving the lives of children, about his unwavering commitment to ethical business practices. When Richard took the stage to accept his crystal trophy, the applause was thunderous. "Thank you all," he said into the microphone, his voice smooth as honey. "This award means more to me than I can express, but I want to dedicate it to someone very special. Someone who taught me that the measure of a person is not what they take from the world, but what they give back." He paused, and I knew what was coming. He was going to dedicate the award to my mother. He was going to use her memory, her stolen money, her stolen necklace, to polish his image in front of 500 witnesses. I couldn't let him finish that sentence. I stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the stage. Gasps rippled through the crowd as people recognized me. Richard's smile faltered. Harper, standing at the edge of the stage, went rigid. "Clara," Richard said into the microphone, trying to recover. "What a surprise! Ladies and gentlemen, my former wife seems to have crashed our little party. I just have one question," I said, my voice carrying through the silent ballroom. I looked at Harper. "That necklace you're wearing, it's beautiful. Where did you get it?" Harper's hand flew to her throat. It was a gift. "From whom?" "From Richard, of course." "Interesting." I turned to face the crowd. "Because that necklace belonged to my mother. It disappeared from her apartment the day she died. The same day, my husband transferred $50,000 from her account to pay for a business trip to the Caymans. The same day, he and Harper exchanged emails discussing how to handle the situation now that my mother had discovered their affair and their embezzlement." Richard laughed, but it came out strangled. "This is insane. Clara has been unstable since our separation. She needs help, not a platform for her delusions." "Then explain this." I held up my phone, displaying a photograph of the email Eleanor had helped me authenticate. "This is an email from your account to Harper, dated 3 years ago. It says, and I quote, 'The old woman is threatening to go to the police. We need to act before she ruins everything. I'll handle it. Just make sure Clara doesn't suspect anything. You sent this email 2 days before my mother died.'" The room had gone deathly silent. Richard's face was gray. Harper was backing away from the stage, but she bumped into a pillar and stopped, trapped. "I'll handle it," I repeated. "Those were your exact words. And 2 days later, my mother was dead. Heart attack, they said. But I found her medical records. She had no history of heart disease. Her last checkup, just a month before she died, showed a perfectly healthy heart." "This is ridiculous," Richard sputtered. "You can't possibly—" "I also found a receipt," I continued, "from a pharmacy in Hartford. Someone purchased a large quantity of digoxin, a heart medication that can cause cardiac arrest if given to someone who doesn't need it. The purchase was made with a credit card in your name, Richard. The day before my mother died. Harper let out a sob. She was shaking uncontrollably now, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, she cried out. I swear I didn't know he was going to kill her. He said he would just talk to her, convince her to keep quiet. I never thought— Shut up! Richard roared, spinning toward her. His mask had finally cracked, revealing the monster underneath. Shut your mouth, you stupid. She's confessing, someone in the crowd shouted. She's admitting they did it. I didn't want anyone to die, Harper wailed. It was supposed to just be about the money. We were going to leave the country, start over somewhere else. But then she found out, and Richard said we had no choice, and I was too scared to stop him, and— Harper! Richard's voice was a whip crack. One more word and I will tell them everything. About the pills, about how you were the one who put them in her tea. The room exploded. People were shouting, scrambling for their phones, pushing toward the exits. Security guards rushed toward the stage. And Harper, her face a mask of horror and betrayal, turned on Richard like a cornered animal. You promised me we would be together, she screamed. You said if I helped you, we would be rich, we would be free. But you never loved me, did you? I was just another tool. Just like Clara, just like her mother. You used us all. You helped him kill my mother, I said quietly, and my voice cut through the chaos like a knife. You were my best friend, and you helped him murder my mother for money. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had already called 911. Richard tried to run, but a group of guests blocked his path. He looked around wildly, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Clara, he said, and now his voice was pleading. Clara, you don't understand. Your mother was going to ruin everything. She was going to take away everything I had worked for. I didn't have a choice. You have to understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You married me for my inheritance. You stole from my mother for years. When she tried to stop you, you killed her. And then you spent 3 years pretending to grieve with me, sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, while you planned to take everything else and leave me with nothing. The police arrived. Richard was handcuffed, still protesting his innocence. Harper was led away in a separate car, sobbing and incoherent. Diane Chen, the reporter, approached me with her recorder. Mrs. Bennett, how does it feel to finally have justice for your mother? I thought about it for a long moment. It doesn't feel like victory, I finally said. It feels like waking up from a nightmare and realizing the nightmare was your entire life. But at least now I know the truth, and the truth, no matter how painful, is better than living a lie. 6 months later, I stood in my mother's apartment in New Haven, the one she had kept secret, the one where she had died trying to protect me. Richard and Harper were both serving 25 years to life for first-degree murder and financial fraud. The trial had been national news, and the evidence had been overwhelming. I had sold the house in Greenwich. I had used part of the recovered money to establish the Margaret Bennett Foundation, named after my mother, which provided legal resources for elderly victims of financial abuse. The rest I had donated to the children's hospitals that Meridian Pharmaceuticals had claimed to support but had actually been defrauding for years. Eleanor had become my closest friend and advisor. We had lunch together every week, and she always ordered my mother's favorite dish in her memory. I had also started designing again. Not mansions for wealthy clients, but community centers for underserved neighborhoods. The pay was almost nothing, but the work filled something in me that I hadn't even known was empty. The apartment was nearly cleared out now. I had kept a few of my mother's things, her books, her reading glasses, the shawl she had crocheted during my childhood. The rest I had donated to charity. As I was about to leave, I noticed a loose floorboard I had somehow missed before. I pried it up and found one last item, a small photograph of me and my mother, taken when I was about 5 years old. On the back, in her handwriting, were the words, "My Clara, stronger than she knows, braver than she believes, loved more than she will ever understand." I held the photograph to my chest and cried for the first time in months, not tears of grief, but tears of release. My mother had known me better than I had known myself. She had believed in my strength even when I hadn't, and she had left me the tools to save myself, trusting that I would find them when I was ready. I walked out of the apartment and into the morning sun. My phone buzzed with a message from my foundation's coordinator. A new case had come in, an elderly woman whose grandson was trying to steal her life savings. Would I be willing to meet with her? I typed back immediately. Yes. Tell her I'm on my way. My war was over. But my work, the work my mother had started, the work of protecting the vulnerable from those who would exploit them, that work was just beginning. And so the story ends, my friends. A story about betrayal by those we trust most, but also a story about the incredible strength that lives inside each of us, waiting to be discovered. I'm sure it left a mark on everyone. And perhaps the main question that remains with all of us after the finale: did Clara do the right thing? On the one hand, she exposed criminals. She brought justice for her murdered mother. She stopped people who had been exploiting the vulnerable for years. Her victory seems absolute. But on the other hand, the cost was devastating. She lost her husband, her best friend, her entire social world. She had to accept that the people closest to her had been deceiving her for over a decade. Was justice worth such total destruction of everything she knew? What do you think about this? I would really like to hear your opinion. Perhaps you have some questions about the plot. Did something seem incomplete? Or are you curious about what happened to other characters? Please don't hesitate to write everything on your mind in the comments below this video. I will make sure to read all your thoughts. And of course, if this story touched you, if you sympathized with Clara and followed her struggle with bated breath, please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. Your likes and comments are the best reward for us and an incentive to create new, even more captivating stories for you. All the best. At the end of this video, a window will appear in the middle of the screen. Please click on this window. Our other most interesting stories will be waiting for you there.